Hi, everyone. This is Kalia from Marcus Evans. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar on Beyond Connectivity, designing robust, flexible communications for the utilities of tomorrow. This is brought to you in partnership with Ceragon Networks. Before we begin, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. As you can see at the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets. They're resizable and movable, so please move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. I'd also like to encourage you to submit any questions that you might have by using the Q&A widget, and we'll try to answer as many as possible throughout the broadcast. However, if a full answer is needed or we perhaps run out of time, we'll make sure to reach out to you afterwards. I'd also like to draw your attention to the resource list that will contain a copy of today's slide deck, and please bookmark any links that you might find useful. To answer any common technical issues, advise to use the help widget. And finally, a reminder to look out for an email within the next 2 hours with links to review today's session. At this point, I'm pleased to introduce you to our moderator and our host. We have with us Dimitri Batistas, who is the North American Sales Manager of Infrastructure at Ceragon. I'm very happy to have you on, Dimitri. I'm going to hand over to you, and you can take it from here.
Appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Very, very, very excited to have this conversation and this thought leadership with some of my colleagues in the panel here, ranging from different utilities throughout North America. And today we're going to be talking about beyond connectivity, basically designing robust, flexible communications for the utilities of tomorrow. My name is Dimitri Batistas. As Kyle had said, I'm the sales manager for North America at Ceragon Networks, concentrating on utilities specifically. Just a little bit of background on Ceragon Networks. We're actually an equipment manufacturer that's leading the way in point-to-point licensed microwave backhaul and full end-to-end solutions in the wireless world. Very acting more as a system integrator, a lot with the critical infrastructure side of things. We do cater to a lot of the tier one operators. But within the last 3 years, we've been doing full end-to-end solutions, whether it be private LTE, 5G, Wi-Fi, SCADA systems throughout North America and globally right now. And I'd like to take the time to introduce the panel today. We're going to have a fantastic discussion. We have Sean Wagner, who's the Director of Transmission and Distribution Projects over at Nevada Energy. We have Chris Kerr, who's Director of Grid Modernization Analysis at Liberty Utilities. We have Michael Porcaro, who's the Director of Innovative Grid Solutions at National Grid. And of course, myself as the moderator. I just want to maybe give a couple of moments to my panel here to introduce themselves. So Sean, would you like to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Happy to be part of the discussion here and really come at this from the perspective of Nevada. We've seen just an incredible amount of growth over the last 5 to 7 years. And I think it's good for us to get together and have these conversations so that we're building the grid of the future and we're learning from each other. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sean. Chris, want to give a little brief introduction on Liberty Utilities and some of the roles and responsibilities as Director of Grid Modernization Analysis?
Sounds good. Thanks, Dimitri. I'll echo Sean's statement. Happy to be here with everybody, both on the panel and everybody tuning in. So Liberty Utilities is a little bit unique. We're headquartered in Canada, but I'm going to say 95% of our electric, gas, and water utilities are in the States. My primary role and responsibility these days is working with our central region, which is Missouri, and a little bit of distribution in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. We were awarded a DOE grant a couple of years back for a $100 million distribution automation or FLIZR deployment. So communications is an integral piece of that. So the comms piece is near and dear to my heart, and it's something we're grappling with these days.
Thank you for that, Chris. And Michael, want to give a little bit of insight over National Grid and being a Director of Innovative Grid Solutions?
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri. Yeah, happy to be here today as well. So my name is Mike Porcaro. I'm Director for our Grid Solutions team at National Grid, covering Massachusetts primarily right now. And the team I have is mostly focused on our DERMS development, so DER management system, and ways that we can find innovative solutions for flexible connection of both DG, energy storage, and even load customers as we're going forward. Because like the other utilities, we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of projected growth as we go forward over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So trying to make sure we stay prepared and ahead of that. So happy to be here today. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and just towards the audience, I just want to make a comment here. This is a fantastic panel because, you know, we've met on a couple of occasions at different shows, different speaking engagements, and really trying to get through or assist with the journey with a lot of the audience members right now is assisting the journey through digital transformation on a lot of these private networks. And when we're talking about private networks, it's other than the tier one operators. It's really looking at, you know, for example, Liberty Utilities or National Grid, Nevada Energy, having their own private network in order to run a lot of these new cutting edge applications, and basically looking at, you know, how do we evolve and what are the you know, the best practices and steps to take in this digital, you know, modernization within the utilities market? Because as a lot of us know, you know, the technology has been evolving at a rapid pace, but the infrastructure or the utilities themselves, you know, weren't basically keeping up as the, you know, as fast as the boom, if you will, on the technology side. And that's something that, you know, we want to address and we want to help you guys with today. So just a little bit of background on Ceragon. I know a lot of people somewhat know the name Ceragon, but don't really know the name Ceragon, but we are a global company. Basically, we're the global innovator, leading solutions provider for end-to-end wireless connectivity, as I stated before. Over 1 billion systems deployed. We're over in over 130 different countries. We are over 1,000 employees globally as well. And we do have offices in North America, actually located in Plano. And we're able to do all the mapping, the design, deployment, and operating the networks on these private networks. And this is basically separate from the AT&Ts or the Verizons. This is going to be for the organizations basically putting together their networks, operating their networks, having full security, full control, and full visibility on what's going on. And we're able to help you throughout the entire stage. It's really a la carte menu. You know, it's always a question of capability versus capacity. You know, at Ceragon, we're able to help. If you do have the capacity or don't have the capability, we're there to assist, and vice versa as well. So first things first, I'd like to get into a poll question just to really understand what the audience, you know, what keeps them up at night, and, you know, what is some of the topics that are in the back of their minds right now. And right now, I just want to take a couple of seconds. If you're maybe 10 or 15 seconds, if the audience is able to just punch in their thoughts on what is the most significant challenge your organization faces in building a resilient utility network. Is it, you know, integrating next generation technologies? Is it ensuring network security and compliance? Is it addressing legacy infrastructure issues? Or is it maintaining operational continuity? And I think, you know, a lot of these answers touch on basically this particular question, but what would be the #1 priority right now for a lot of you? And I'll probably give another 5 seconds just to have you guys answer this, take your time. But really think about this, and these are probably the hottest topics when having engagements with a lot of C-level or directors, even field operations individuals for utilities networks. This is more or less the 4 hot topics that we're thinking about. All right, here are the results. So the #1, it's ensuring network security and compliance. I know, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody on the panel. Sean, Chris, or Michael, I'm pretty sure that we've seen this quite a bit. We got integrating next generation technologies at 27.8% as well. Interesting enough, the addressing legacy infrastructure issues is probably at the lowest right now in these poll questions, but it's not a surprise to see these 2 results at the top. I think that they were strategically placed by the marketing team when they put it together, but it is something that is definitely on a lot of people's mind when we're looking at security and obviously integrating next generation, which I want to kind of fast forward here and go to my panel and the other moderators to look at, you know, as utilities modernize, guys, you know, what guiding principles should be at the core of designing a resilient and scalable network? Like, how do you balance the immediate needs with preparing for future demands? And I want to throw it over to Sean, because I know we've spoke about this many times, but I'd like to get your thoughts on this for the audience.
Yeah, this is always a struggle. I mean, I think I don't speak for the minority when I say there's always regulatory pressures with investor-owned utilities, and quite frankly, any utility operator when it comes to capital costs. So when you're looking at modernizing, it never fails that the scope just continues to grow with these things as the technology grows. And it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with my metering folks, and they're saying, well, Sean, we're past the Gen 1 metering, and we're well on our way with Gen 2. But by the way, we have Gen 3, 4, and 5, and it's like, oh my gosh, like how do you keep up with that? And so when we look at the challenges that we face as a state, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is we've probably all been to Vegas at some point in time. It's one of the most visited places in the world. I think they have 60 million tourists on an annual basis that are transients into the area. So having said that, it's very flat there. So the complexity there, not too bad. Reno is also a valley. It's very flat, just kind of east of the Lake Tahoe area, if you're not familiar. But Nevada as a whole has more mountain ranges than any state in the US. So whenever you look at that connectivity across the grid, when you look at the bulk electric system, it becomes exponentially expensive to make these investments. So where do you draw the line? And that's really the challenge there. One thing we've had the benefit of is a lot of our new load growth has been through data centers. Conversely, a lot of our new growth has been through data centers, right? So that's a whole nother ball game here in terms of how do we incorporate a lot of that communication. So from our standpoint, we try not to be on the very cutting edge of things, but in the same sense, we need to make sure that we have a robust system that is not prone to any security issues, that's complying with our critical infrastructure requirements, and we're able to run redundant communications. That is often the challenge. So like I mentioned, the mountain ranges, what kind of technology do you use? We don't always have the benefit of running fiber lines. So we're forced to rely more on microwave, rely more on cellular networks, and those inherently have their flaws. They have their weaknesses. We get a lot of extreme weather. So at some point, it's like, how much of an investment do you make to prepare yourself? But in the same sense, how much of that investment is recoverable? It is always a challenge. It is always something we're getting scrutinized with. And, one of the things we've done to address that is we've had to push out the depreciation of assets. Historically, we would depreciate something, say 20, 30 years, but we're getting pressure from our regulators to push that depreciation out so that we're able to make larger capital investments, and don't even start, on the tariffs and everything else that we're contending with. But that's some of our perspective on things.
That's great insight. I appreciate that, Sean. I know it's a balancing act always. And I'm going to switch gears over to Michael on this one. Do you work with, when you're trying to balance the immediate needs and preparing for the future, are you working with the internal stakeholders? Are you looking at outside consulting companies? Like, what does that look like over at National Grid?
Yeah, thanks. So we do a mixture of both. It depends on the asset that we're looking to develop, the platform we're looking to develop, whether or not it's something that can be taken in-house or if we have to contract out for it. So it really depends on the application. But when we think about guiding principles and what's at the core of how we develop some of these products, we ultimately just want to make sure we can maximize the utility from all of our assets. So make sure that we can get the most out of every pole and wire we have on the grid and make the most for all of our customers, keeping their ultimate interconnection affordable and the rates affordable. So that's really a big focus. And one way that we've tried to do that is through scaled deployment of different platforms. We're trying to take an agile approach and develop somewhat of a baseline core product or system that we can build on over time and release features on and release functionality. So we don't have to go back and rebuild as we keep moving along. So we know that the grid's changing and the needs of the customers are changing, and a lot of the use cases are changing year by year now. So it's developing faster than ever. So we're trying to make sure that we can keep pace with that and try to stay as flexible as we can to meet the customer needs.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I know that when we get engaged with a lot of customers, it's really looking at the vulnerability points, but also understanding what the evolution plan is and putting a evolution plan together. And Chris, I'd like to get some of your thoughts over at Liberty. Do you have any out of the box thinking when you're putting together these designing a resilient network, but addressing today's needs, but planning for the future as well?
I mean, I'd love to say we have the magic answer that everybody's looking for, but I think we're pretty much in the same boat as everybody else. We're all trying to find the answer together. Liberty's a little bit unique in that I primarily these days I'm working in the central region in Missouri, but one of our operating territories is on the other side of Lake Tahoe, just across from Sean there. That's our CalPeco territory, where we're actually doing an AMI deployment right now, again, through a DOE grant. One of our guiding principles that's kind of being ingrained in our company as we reshape ourselves these days is really, what is the customer looking for? And that's a unique challenge for us because we have customers in CalPeco, which may be looking for something a little bit different than what the customers in Missouri are looking for and the ones in New Hampshire. We try to keep in tune with the customers, literally sending surveys out to customers, asking them, would you rather have a 1 4-hour outage a year or 4 1-hour outages a year? And what is that worth to you? But as you can imagine, you get a variety of responses, both within one operating region and then different answers across the different operating regions. But at the end of the day, to other folks' points, trying to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of what customers want and then keep pace with that. I think one of the things that we try to do when we're looking to modernize the grid is whatever you're putting in place, you need it to basically be a platform that you're going to build on in the future. And so customers might only want something out of it today, but you really need to consider, if customer needs evolve, do we need to go with a whole new platform, or is the thing that we're putting in now something that we can incrementally build on? And I find that is something that the regulators understand. There's always going to be some upfront investment. But with the way technology is changing out there these days, there's a lot of options on the market, and it can be tough. But you really got to find the things that are going to be a platform for the future, and not just the answer to today's problems and then new product for tomorrow's.
No, that's a great point. I think dialogues such as this one really hammer home the think outside of the box, think about the future. I know we always get stuck in our day-to-day. We're creatures of habit. This is what we're the best at. This is what we're looking at. But really, having these engagements, having these conversations, I think really opens up a lot of our minds when we're looking at building some type of resilient, scalable network that's going to address today, but also the future. But getting the input as well from a lot of our customers, different stakeholders, different technology vendors. I think it's great, and I really appreciate that input, Chris. I'd like to go ahead and get another poll question, if possible, which is, which technology do you believe will have the greatest impact on enhancing utility operations over the next 5 years? And it's funny, I always ask this question at a lot of interactions, just to understand, where do the utilities think they're going to get the most out of a lot of these networks, right, and a lot of these technologies. So we're looking at private 5G LTE networks. We're looking at advanced IoT applications. There's cloud computing systems. And of course, the hottest topic on the block right now is AI and machine learning tools. I mean, I don't think I could probably go a day without hearing AI, 20 times, if you will. So just give maybe about 5 more seconds for the audience to respond. But this one's an interesting one because, I mean, even as a technology company, this is probably where a lot of debates start getting into play. And honestly, I think the proof is going to be in the pudding when we get the results here. Not a surprise, AI machine learning tools is number one at 46.2%. But private 5G LTE networks comes in at second place at 30.8, and of course, advanced IoT applications. These are probably the top three that I've seen personally in the market, specifically talking with a lot of leaders and a lot of individuals. Where do you see it coming? AI and machine learning tools, of course, number one. Can't go wrong with that. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but ChatGPT is my new best friend. I probably use it almost every single day, even if it's a translation. I mean, you can't go wrong. But I want to maybe get Michael's opinion on this one here. I'll go to you first. But private LTE, 5G, and industrial IoT are often described as game changers for utilities. But when we're looking at your particular role and your experience, how are these technologies actually transforming your day-to-day operations on the ground?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So in the space that I work in, mostly it relates to the IoT side of things there. So we're developing different technologies and trying to advance them. So things like FLISR technologies, where we're looking to isolate where the fault locations would be and be able to minimize outages for our customers. We have that deployed on a good portion of our grid today, and now we're trying to look into next stepping that to get towards integrating DER that's on the grid to be able to better leverage the FLISR deployment opportunities. So you can minimize the outage zone even further if you have more advanced control of the loads that are going to be on each portion of the grid you're trying to sectionalize. And then pairing that in the future with things like AMI, we're going through our AMI deployments right now, looking to have those completed by the end of 2027 with the Gen 2 AMI devices. So tying that all together and coming back to our control centers through our ADMS systems, our advanced data management systems, tying that in with DERMS, and looking at how we can get all the different assets on our grid to talk to each other so that we can have the most robust control and be able to operate a little bit better in real time and be able to give a better experience for all the customers. So that's sort of where we see it evolving in the future. And it's starting to happen right now. And we have roadmaps and plans to have it evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's pretty exciting to see what we came from and think where we were a couple of years ago, just not even being able to do that, having just like a simple recloser that opens up an entire feeder. And now we're able to minimize to just one specific zone. So it's pretty interesting.
Oh, it's fantastic. And Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Maybe some of your input on what are day-to-day operations on the ground. How's it being affected with these new cutting-edge technologies?
Well, I'll echo Michael's sort of sentiment that I started in the industry in 2009. So I want to say around 2010. The term out there, everybody called it smart grid. And they were saying, this is kind of the future and people are going to have batteries and EVs. And I'll say that in hindsight, I feel like we are kind of now in that future that folks are always talking about. So one of the challenges is, no more unidirectional power flow and it's just poles and wires and people get their power. It's bidirectional power flow. The term out there, prosumer, there's no such thing as just consumers anymore, really. Everybody's a prosumer. And in order to basically manage that, there's a lot more, I'm just going to say digital devices on the grid telling you what's going on the grid. How that really transforms the grid is, you're going to get a lot more data, a lot more visibility into what's going on. But to me, one of the fundamental things, and it kind of corresponds with our current FLISR deployment in Missouri, if you have 100 feeders or 1,000 feeders, doesn't matter how many, if you put something like FLISR distribution automation up and you start being able to sectionalize better and sort of recreate the system topography by opening switches and closing other ones, you no longer have 100 or 1,000 circuits. You've almost got like 1 million chunks that could be fed from multiple different directions. And that's complicated in and of itself to operate the grid. But what it really enables you to do too is say, okay, where is the actual power outage coming from? Historically, you might have had to send a crew out and they might spend an hour or two driving in the middle of the night just to figure out where the outage is. But being able to sort of cut the grid up into more pieces and have more devices bringing data back is really going to help us be able to pinpoint where issues are when things occur and be able to respond faster and more efficiently.
That's a great point, and maybe extend a little bit, at least from what I see, is a lot of the preventive maintenance as well, getting ahead of the A-ball, if you will, instead of behind it. So essentially, if you do start to see some abnormalities within the network itself, you could get ahead and basically do some troubleshooting and potentially have somebody out there to go replace, whatever equipment that needs replacing before there's an actual outage. At least in my experience, that's from what I've seen. Sean, any comments on this particular question?
Oh, 100%. So I'm going to put on my incident management hat here for a second. So out of the things that we talked about, private 5G, the advanced IoT, cloud computing, AI, I'd say, cloud computing's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Yes, it's great. It gives us a lot of capabilities that we really wouldn't have ever imagined. But, not to speak for Liberty, but that situational awareness is just critical. And so I would venture to say that probably some folks on the call struggled with which one really is the priority. Like, we could probably rank them, but there's a case to be made for all three. And so I bring up that whole incident management component because one thing we've seen in our fire-prone areas is it's all about situational awareness. It's all about those advanced IoT devices. I would have never imagined 25 years ago that the utilities would be in the weather monitoring business. And so that's that other piece of this. Well, how much of that information do you share with the public? How much do you make available? Is it almost too much to let them know that wind conditions are picking up in this area? That's probably going to, trigger a potential, public safety power shutoff, something like that. So it's tricky, right? What do we do with all this data? I think that's why everyone is so excited about AI, because it's not that the utilities aren't already collecting a ton of data. It's how do we navigate all of that data? And candidly, I think utilities have always struggled with that. That's always been a very cumbersome process to go through all of the data points that we have. So it's exciting to see the opportunities that AI presents and taking some of that guesswork out of the day-to-day operations. I would also echo the comments that when we talk about, fault locating, isolation, service restoration, that is just invaluable to us to be able to save that time and being able to troubleshoot remotely or through automated technology. So definitely a lot of opportunities there, and we've seen the cost savings firsthand. We've seen the cost savings during our activations during wildfire events. It really has been beneficial to our customers in shortening those outages, understanding, wildfire behavior. All of those things play into a better customer experience at the end of the day. And that's really what it's all about. So I would say that these priorities, they are constantly changing, but there really is a day-to-day operational benefit with all of them. You can make the use case across the value chain for vertically aligned utilities.
Yeah, and I want to echo what you just said. Funny enough, a lot of the projects that we're working on over at Sargon Networks on the utility side is wildfire mitigation. There's a lot looking at private 5G LTE and looking at the IoT sensors along with the AI and machine learning and taking all that data, but understanding what that data represents and classifying in a way where it's readable. And I think that's very important as well, at least on the preventive maintenance side. Because, let's be honest, Sean and Chris and Michael, maybe about 5 years ago or 10 years ago, wildfire mitigation for utilities was not on the priority list. It's something that maybe was a conversation, at a bar having a beer, but now it's literally at the forefront, which is quite interesting. I'm happy you mentioned that, Sean. Which leads us into our next question, which is, we're talking about all these new cutting edge technologies. We're talking about AI, but still a lot of utilities are operating with decades old legacy systems, some older than me, believe it or not, because I am only 20 years old. But what strategies have been proven effective for integrating next gen applications like sensors and automations into a lot of these environments, but more importantly, without causing a disruption? I want to get your thoughts on this one here, Chris.
Sure. So, this one hits near and dear to me because our FLISR deployment in Missouri through the DOE grant, I'm just going to say we have about 150 reclosers, midline reclosers up across 300 circuits today. but the DOE grant itself is to put another 310 reclosers up, probably across 200 of those circuits. So we're effectively tripling the number of reclosers, and the reclosers out there today are some old oil-filled reclosers with no visibility into what's happening out there whatsoever. And now we're putting new modern reclosers with modern controllers, and it's all coming back to the SCADA system. So our first challenge was like, do we go with a big bang approach, or do you run the risk that you literally could cause a bang, and not in a good way? So we wanted to start small, and I've always just found that start small, start with a pilot. Sometimes even before the pilot phase, put a setup in a lab, find some space in the warehouse, and you can connect all your devices. They may not be on potential like they are out in the field, but you can at least set the schemes up and have them operate. And basically starting small, start with your pilots. You're going to get some learnings out of it. And I mean, the learnings, they're going to be so multifaceted, from operations considerations that you hadn't anticipated to crew concerns to we talked about in the previous question, like cybersecurity concerns. You're putting devices out there that you've never dealt with before. You don't know what's going to come up. So really just starting small, taking your learnings, and then expanding on that. One of our challenges with where we want to put the reclosers is, do we want to hop to the next circuit to improve reliability as soon as possible, even though that's dozens of miles away and it's a different group of crews that's working on it? Or do we want to kind of start from the center essentially and build your way out to ensure continuity of things like the communications and not introducing new issues? So yeah, I'd sum it up as basically being start small, build up, and embrace the disruptions that you are going to find, but disruptions from a good sense, as in we are getting more efficient. We're able to respond to outages faster.
I think the motto, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, hammers home on this. And Michael, I'm going to throw it over to you, because I know we've had some conversations in the past. You want to give a little bit of insight?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to echo that a little bit, because starting small and making sure you have a good strategy of how you're going to deploy is something that we value here. Safety and reliability are the two top, things that you're ever going to hear from any utility across the country, because we got to make sure that the power stays on, maximum uptime, and that everybody's safe, everybody stays, going home safe at the end of the day, whether it's the public or our workers. So making sure that we have a good, well-tested deployment before it goes in the field is pretty critical. And on that vein, we do have some lab settings where we try to test different setups before they go out into the field. So we have entire spaces where we can model and mock our ADMS with a light DERM system, with some going out to different pieces of equipment, controlling actual recloser cabinets and control cabinets, and modeling what FLISR deployments may look like. So getting to test out different strategies to see how they would work before they go live in the field. And then we also get the chance to bring in the field crews, the engineers, the control center folks, to be able to see it and touch it and play with it, to be able to have a hands-on experience, because that speaks volumes more so than a PowerPoint deck or the user manual of how they're supposed to use it, right? So that's really kind of the approach we've been trying to take here. And the thought process that goes into developing those, unfortunately, sometimes it can be very lengthy, because you got to make sure you go through all the right strategies before you send it out. But having a place where people can get their hands on it and trying to get from the desktop concept phase into a comfort zone for the people who are going to actually be using it every day, that's the mentality and the approach we've tried to take over the past few years, and it seems to have been pretty successful for us so far.
That's fantastic insight, and I think it's overlooked as well, bringing in the techs, getting their hands on it as well, and also getting their input, because making decisions from a desk sometimes doesn't really correlate with what's happening out in the field, which is really interesting. Or even a lab environment, to say, I know we've experienced that quite a bit. And I want to turn it over to Sean on this one here, but when we're talking about disruptions, whether it's cyber attacks or extreme weather, equipment failures, it is a growing concern within the utility market, actually all markets, to be honest. I mean, public safety is another one. Oil and gas, I could go on forever. But, what approaches, Sean, have you seen work best for ensuring continuity of service and enabling, most importantly, the rapid recovery?
Yeah, I think it's the fundamentals. So it comes down to communication. And so it's interesting to see how much things have changed over the last couple of decades. It used to be, keep the lights on at all costs, right? We got to get the customers back in service. And one of the things we've really learned at the IOUs that I've worked at is that transparency is key. It's kind of like that old adage, you rip the Band-Aid off and it's a lot better. And one thing that we've really seen is not only the education up front, especially when we talk about wildfires, right? That's always top of mind for myself being on the West Coast. We've seen some really significant events, which is unfortunate. But that extreme weather, the changing weather patterns. And one thing we've done over the last couple of years, especially through the incident management team type model, is being proactive in the absence of events. Hey, we're entering fire season. You can expect that we may have intermittent public safety shutoffs. We may have high wind events. You may be impacted. And so really developing robust plans that talk about what does that impact actually look like in the absence of an event. So what we've learned over the last couple of years, and I guess, it's probably been more than that now, time flies, is that being transparent as early as possible. So for example, with our wind events, we really start looking at wind events a week out, folks. That's the crazy part, is having that internal meteorology team. We're using that communication equipment to gather all of those data points, working with the National Weather Service, working with our different software models that we have to model, fire behavior, wind behavior, and burn rates, all of that stuff, so that we are as informed as possible. But a week out, we start getting a really good feel for what this is going to look like. Does it change? Absolutely, things evolve. But we have a tiered approach to where we start getting to like that day 4 before the event, we start noticing. We start actually letting our communities know. We get to day 3, the messaging ramps up. We get to day 2, it starts becoming more direct communication with the actual areas that are impacted. And then day 1, obviously, it's even more aggressive, so that people understand that, hey, this may be a 4-hour-long event. It may be an 8-hour-long event. And so we've really taken a very conservative approach because we want people to be able to prepare. We don't want them to be shocked by what's happening. And I think the proof is in the pudding. One thing that we found last year is we had a pretty major fire event that threatened a good, oh my gosh, 20-30% of the valley community up in the northern Nevada area. And interestingly enough, following the event, we actually didn't have the backlash of people, hey, why did you turn off our power? There was no fire in the area. It was actually the opposite. Like, thank you for being as proactive as you are. Thank you for what you're doing to protect the community. That was eye-opening. It was definitely different from the response that we've seen, or at least I've seen at other utilities in the past. So it's interesting how your approach can really change the public reaction. But certainly extreme weather is top of mind for us on the West Coast, unfortunately. And, whether it's climate change or not, I don't know. But we've definitely seen different weather patterns.
Yeah, and I've seen, funny enough, even on the East Coast now, it's starting more and more. So I'm in Montreal, Quebec, up in Canada, and there's been quite a few wildfires on the East Coast. And unfortunately, even when I went on vacation to Greece, the village, the mountain right behind me had wildfires as well. I mean, it is a global thing. Extreme weather, whether it be, fires, hurricanes. I think having some type of disaster recovery program is very important on all aspects. But, the approach it's interesting you said that, and I want to throw it over to Chris and Michael, whichever you'd like to maybe expand on that. But, if you're looking at collaboration and informing, not just the general public or the customers, but, everybody, if you will, do you find that they're a lot more understanding when there are actual outages due to, for instance, a larger event that's going on?
Absolutely. So what we found is when we inform the public that this is the day we think the event's going to happen, and we're really keeping them in the know, that has been what they significantly appreciate. So for example, hey, we think this weather event's going to happen on Thursday of this week. As we get closer, we'll hone in that time frame. So, people can plan. It's really as simple as that. When you let them know all the information that you have, and then when the actual event occurs and it ends up being a shorter duration, they certainly appreciate that. And so that's where that conservative approach comes into play, letting them know the worst case scenario, letting them know kind of all the facts that we have at the moment. And it's always great when a weather event doesn't materialize. We've also had that happen where we've had the ability to cancel a public safety power shutoff. So it's all about that continuity of service for them. They want to know when can they rely on the lights being on. And if we're not communicating that with the facts that we have, we're not giving them the justice that they deserve.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. We got another poll question here for the audience. What is your organization's top priority when it comes to digital transformation and utility management? Is it improving service delivery and reliability? Are we looking at optimizing resource management and efficiency? Is it enhancing data analytics and decision making, or is it strengthening cybersecurity measures? I'm pretty sure everybody's probably saying, wow, all of the above, but what would you actually prioritize? I'll give a couple of more, maybe about 5 more seconds to the audience just to respond on this. I think I have an idea on where this is going, but I can be wrong. Let's see. So it is improving service delivery and reliability, absolutely, on number 1. And there's actually, there's a tie. I thought it was going to be strengthening cybersecurity measures as a clear number 2, but it actually tied with enhancing data analytics and decision making. Wow, okay. So I think that probably segues into our 5th question here, which, with regulation shiftings and, obviously customer expectations that are rising, what are some of the most important steps utilities could take right now to future-proof their communications infrastructure? And on this one here, I'd like to get Michael's input.
Yeah, so the future-proofing aspect, especially like we've been talking about with a lot of the technologies changing and the customer needs and use cases changing, is something that's a challenge we've had to wrestle with. So what we're trying to do here at Grid is with our systems try to make them future-proof by being able to accept different future technologies. So I'm thinking about maybe our DERM system as a good example. We have a gateway box that will be located at the front end of every customer site, and it really acts as a protocol translator. And we're using that to right now accept and work through DNP3, but we're having it also be able to accept 2030.5 or any OpenADR, anything else that customers may have for communications protocols going forward. So it really won't matter what kind of equipment they have at the site, as long as we can talk to the inverter that they have or the building management system they have, maybe to be able to say what the grid could handle at that time. And we would just have a pass through for our box to be able to have it communicate with the grid services. So we're looking to do that on a lot of different types of equipment and a lot of platforms we have, because again, we know the customer needs are going to be changing. We want to try to stay open and agile to whatever the future communication protocols may be. So trying to make sure we don't box ourselves into anything at this point.
No, that's absolutely true. The last thing you want to do is box yourself into one particular technology, and then essentially it's not communicating with everything else, and it's a rip and replace, which is going to be a massive capital investment. Chris, I'd like to get your thoughts on how you looking at from Liberty's perspective, how you're looking at the most important steps that you see utilities taking right now for future-proofing a lot of the communications.
Yeah, I'd say, like we kind of talked about with that first question, talking about, putting in a platform that can be built on. I feel like we're almost in an era where the utilities can kind of put a little more pressure on vendors now and ask them, not just what does your solution do for me today, but, ask your vendors, where are you going with this? Is this a platform that you plan on building on? Is this actually going to be around 10 years from now? Or, is this maybe yesterday's solution that's going to be phased out in 3 years because you have something new coming down the pipeline? So don't be afraid to. I mean, once you're putting in technology and you're making sizable investments, you really are in a partnership with your vendors. So I'd say make sure that you're comfortable in that partnership and put difficult questions to them to really understand where they're going, and is this a priority for them? Is building on a platform a priority for them? What insights can they offer from their other customers and where they see the industry going? So basically, don't just treat vendors as a product supplier that you buy something from. Treat them as a partner and have those difficult discussions to really feel out, is this the partnership that we want to be in long term?
I'm happy you said that, Chris. And funny, that wasn't even scripted. I mean, look, myself as being a vendor, I mean, I get a lot of pressure from a lot of the utilities, understanding what our roadmap is, and our roadmap is contingent on what the utilities need. And I think there has to be that constant collaboration and thought leadership from both parties. I'll give a perfect example. Talking to R&D, we were supposed to get rid of TDM and T1s almost 5 years ago. We still support that, because we do know that the utilities still need those particular comms within their network. But it's aspects like that when you're engaging, and this goes for the audience, a lot of the utilities, when engaging in the vendors, like Chris said, I want to echo that. Put their feet to the fire. Understand what the roadmaps are. Understand what, why can't it be done, or why aren't they looking to be done? Ask them, maybe proof of concepts, maybe it's an R&D, maybe it's a beta version, it might be an incubation, process, whatever it may be. As long as we're able to get what the market needs in order to keep everything, the continuity going, but more important, people safe. Lives matter at this point. I mean, especially when it comes to power. It's something that us over here, we kind of take for granted because, I mean, it's essentially everywhere, but, you only know you only understand how important it is until it goes out. Let's be honest. And on the communication side, I mean, you have to have those communications, a resilient network, because essentially, if you have no visibility, it's when disaster strikes, there's no communications within the actual within, let's say, the field technicians or the first responders, and more important, you don't have any visibility into the network itself. Now, I know we're running a little time, and I want to get the other panels, but I really want to jump to our last question. And this one here is probably the hottest topic, and this is why we left it for last. But for the utilities that have already adopted private wireless or advanced IoT, what lessons stand out? Like I know, for instance, Chris and Sean, you guys have been looking at this quite a bit. But what advice would you give to the peers that are beginning the digital transformation journey when you're looking at advanced IoT or private wireless? And Chris, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I'll focus on the IoT side, and I'll just say to keep it short and sweet, again, something that we're encountering with our DA deployment, getting the hardware out in the field is the easy part. I know that might sound a little weird because it can take a lot of work to get that done. But the whole theme of today, your comms network, all that data that's going to be coming back. The hardware in the field is the easy part. Dealing with getting that data back into the systems in a way that can be used is difficult. But then the piece that I find that folks typically drastically underestimate how difficult it's going to be is, what are you going to do with all that data once it's coming back? Are you actually going to be doing anything with it, or is it just going to be filling up a server somewhere for somebody to maybe look at once a year for that one outage? So you really got to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what are we trying to get out of this deployment, whatever it may be? And are we actually going to be making use of all the data? Because if not, what's the point in putting out that extra hardware and just sort of running up rates? Make sure you have a good balance between what's going out in the field and what you're actually going to be doing with the data coming back.
Most importantly, can you read that data? Does it make sense? I've seen it quite a bit. Sean, I'd like to get your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I love this topic. So, the relationship works both ways with the vendors. So I'm going to go the opposite direction. I would say you can trust in your vendors too. So one of the interesting things that we've kind of been working through is DLR, dynamic line rating. So when we talk about advanced IoT, we recognized early on that, and this is actually a pilot program that we're going through. It was a DOE grant, which, by the way, historically IOUs really we don't apply for a lot of DOE grants. So it was an exciting opportunity to go down that road with. But all of the data that's collected through these DLR devices, we're not the experts. We understand, line ratings and that sort of thing, but the amount of data. So conversely, it's relying on the vendor that we're using to help guide us. But to the point that we were talking about earlier, it's like, how do we integrate that information? One thing has been very clear. We are seeing a 10 to 40% increase in the line capacity based on the data we have. That's huge, folks. Being able to push out, reconductors, rebuilding of transmission lines, we are talking millions of dollars in savings there at a fraction of the cost. These things are really not that expensive. But in the same sense, we've partnered with not only our local university here, University of Nevada, Reno, but Michigan State as well, to have that think tank of what do we do with some of this information, because it really has been more data than we could have ever imagined. But the results are promising. So when I say some of these things, it's like my advice would be, don't be closed-minded about some of that technology that's out there. Start small. Don't be afraid to be, the only one doing it. I know that feels really weird to say for investor-owned utilities, public utilities. We're always very conservative by nature, at least historically. But the benefits are there if you can make the use case. And it sure feels like this is one of those technologies where those advanced IoT devices really are proving to be beneficial in terms of operations.
Appreciate the support for trailblazing, Sean. Michael, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just a couple things. So, the starting small aspect is definitely one thing that, we would recommend. So you want to start somewhere, but, walk before you run type of approach. And we've also found, too, that we have a number of different programs and objectives being progressed at the same time, all of which are creating new data sets, some of which overlap. So just making sure that your internal different groups that are going to progress these are talking with each other, and they at least have some form of collaboration so that you don't overstep and overlap some data, maybe some data sharing, communications, and clog the bandwidth issues with that. And we've also tried to take an approach of trying to collaborate with a lot of others in the other stakeholders in the state. So hearing what the customers really want and how they want us to use the data to be able to benefit them the most. And we also put it out there with one of the state agencies. They were putting a grant out, and they said, well, what utility issues would you like to have addressed? So we described some of the challenges that we're running into and coming up to see. And they went out to bid for third-party developers and contractors to say, well, as an innovative solution, I'm going to develop something new for you, like a new think tank will come up with something. So we're working with external resources on that type of process to see what kind of interesting ideas might be able to just get generated from the ground up. So try to explore every avenue you can, I guess, is the main advice we give there. There's a lot of opportunities available. Most of your states are probably interested in trying to help support you. And there's a lot of good small company startups that might be able to help in addition to the larger vendors that most of us typically go to. So keep all options open.
Oh, absolutely. Collaboration is very important. I know we do quite a bit with universities. I mean, we've developed some softwares and even equipment that address a lot of the customers' needs. And, squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you're not having those conversations, if that information isn't getting out there, nobody's really going to know. Fantastic. All right, and it leaves us about 5 minutes here. I'd like to get a Q&A question. I actually saw one in the in the chat that was really interesting, and I think I want to address it first because it's the question I get asked quite a bit, which is, if we're looking at modern critical infrastructures built upon small constrained IoT devices, whether it be meters, switches, sensors, et cetera, with most of these coming from third-party vendors, how is the end user, the grid, ensure they are not accidentally allowing critical vulnerabilities enter their system? And, I could say with experience is that I think planning is very key. When you're looking at the architecture, when you're looking at the equipment itself, how are you going to put this together? Does it fall within the certifications that are basically necessary for the operational technology side of things, whether it be ISA 295 or 299, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, there's a lot of vendors that are able to look at the architecture, but also the equipment itself and really look and hone in on a lot of the vulnerabilities and then essentially secure it. But Michael, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. When you're looking at a lot of these, new metering and, smart IoT sensors, how do you mitigate the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, it's obviously something we take very seriously. So before any new product would come in and get used, it goes through a pretty rigorous security, acceptance testing, penetration testing, and overall just vulnerability check. So we try to make sure that any of the equipment would be screened ahead of time to make sure we avoid any of those issues. And where the data from it goes is also something we think about as well. Are we going to store that information on premise, or is it going to go to a cloud-based system? If it's going to be on premise, even if we're not required by the state or by the federal government to have it in a critical network environment, some of our systems we do, because we see the information and data that it's sharing and pushing back and forth to have that critical nature where if it goes down, it would have a severe effect, maybe not to the bulk electric system, but it could have a severe effect to a large portion of customers and have a major impact. So trying to think those parts through ahead of time, I guess, is our main strategy to ensure we don't have any bad actors or anything like that come to play.
Security is always a number one topic in any conversation when it comes to technology. Chris, did you want to maybe give your thoughts on this?
I mean, I'll give a small anecdote because cybersecurity is not my forte. So I'll just say when we are working on the DOE grant, the cyber team is right there alongside us. And whenever they're asking us, how does the architecture need to work for this to be functional? All I can say is we show them a device, tell them what we want it to do. And they typically say, well, you're going to have a firewall at the device. You're going to have a firewall at our systems. And then there's going to be a firewall in between those two firewalls. So there's firewalls all over the place. But this is the IT security side. To echo Michael's point, get it in front of them early, let them do their thing. But we rely heavily on our cyber folks for their expertise on that.
Sean, any thoughts on that?
No, I think it was well said.
Perfect. Yeah, there's quite a few questions here. I want to look at how to work with local power co-ops to approve projects. This one I'm gonna throw it over to Sean or Chris. I know you guys have extensive experience on that.
I was gonna let Sean go because if anybody knows our Calpico utility, we actually buy power from NV Energy, so we're almost the local one buying power from Sean's utility. So I'll let
Sean. It's all yours then.
It depends on how we're framing this question. So if it's new technology, it really starts with working with our standards team. So if it's something that has never been vetted before, really that standards team, which is under the engineering umbrella, if you will, and that process can take 6 to 12 months. It's not always the fastest, but to that end, we really want to make sure there's no surprises. So it can feel like we're being very conservative, but in the same sense, we don't want it to turn into an epic failure. So we definitely want to have the conversation. I will say that right now. So if you have new technology and it's something that you think can benefit the utility, I have a lot of people that reach out through LinkedIn. That starts the conversation. And it really helps to have a good supporter within the company to bring in the functional leaders. Unfortunately, with many utilities, and I think I heard this comment earlier, we tend to have silos. So that can be some of the struggle there. It's like, I have this project, but who's the stakeholders that are really involved? Is it multiple stakeholders? It helps to have that person there within the company to help you navigate who needs to be on board.
Awesome. We just got to the top of the hour, and there's still questions in the chat, but I'm going to basically go ahead and take the time and follow up with all these questions as soon as I'm able to. With that said, I really want to thank Sean, Chris, and Michael for the great input. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I hope the audience enjoyed it. I hope there was a lot of insight within this particular webinar and having these conversations. And with that, I'll flip it over back to Kyle.
Hey, Dimitri, sorry, I was just going to say, I see one question in here that I can answer to help somebody out. There's a U.S. utility in Missouri called Evergy that has their own private LTE network. So I see a question there asking about who uses them. So that's one of them, EVERGY. Just Google them, private LTE, and you'll see a bunch of stuff on Google about it.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Chris.
Great. I just want to say a very special thank you to our amazing panelists for your great insights and being so generous with your time today. It was a very interesting discussion. On behalf of myself and Marcus Evans, we'd just like to thank you all so much for the collaboration throughout. To turn things back to the audience, we'd just like to thank you so much for joining us. There were some really great questions and comments that came in. If we weren't able to get to all of them, we'll make sure to reach out to you afterwards. A reminder to look out for an email within the next 2 hours, and we'd love to hear your feedback about what you thought about the webinar. A survey will pop up on your screen in just a moment. We really appreciate any comments that you might have. On behalf of Sarah Gone and Marcus Evans, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and hope to see you again at future events. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day further.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.